Will the New Zealand housing market get better in 2025? Well, house prices have crashed. In just 18 months, they fell 18%. This homeowner lost over $300,000 over the last couple of years. And over the last 12 months, the market has basically gone sideways. But what's going to happen in 2025? Could house prices skyrocket by over 9%, as this bank says? Or could house prices go the other way and fall off a cliff? Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ed, an economist and property investor here at Opus Partners. And one of the criticisms I sometimes read in the comments is that, oh Ed, you own a business that helps people invest in property. You're biased. You're just going to tell me that property prices are going to go up and up and up and ignore all of the bad things, so I just buy a house. Look, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to lay out the four main arguments for why house prices might not go up this year in 2025, and also the 5 reasons why those banks might be right. And that way you can make up your own mind. And if you think I'm being too biased, hey, call me out in the comments section, keep me honest. But before we get into those arguments, it's time for a bit of a weather forecast. It's time to make it rain data. You see, most big banks expect that house prices will go up somewhere between 6 to 7% by the end of 2025. ASB, they even think that house prices will go up just a little over 9%. Personally, I don't believe that answer myself or that number myself, but BNZ and Westpac sitting around that 6.8 to 7% mark. Yeah, I think that could be feasible. ANZ says 6%, but it's not all good news. The Reserve Bank actually just downgraded its forecast. They now think that house prices will rise 3.8% in 2025 compared to the 6% that they thought it would only 3 months ago. But you can't look at these predictions and think, great, that is exactly what's going to happen. And here's the reason why. 3 weeks ago, I was standing in the boardroom at the Real Estate Institute of New Zealand, and I was talking to their board about the New Zealand housing market. And I've got to tell you, it was really hot in this room. I was jumping around, giving a presentation, and I know this is a bit TMI, but I could feel little beads of sweat on my forehead because it was so hot in there. So thank God that one of the board members put up her hand and said, Ed, the world has never felt so uncertain. Trump's telling his allies in Europe that he might not save them and is snuggling up to Russia. China, they've got their eyes on Taiwan. And it looks like we're heading into a trade war. The US are launching tariffs on their allies, and countries like Canada and Mexico are biting back too. And there's so much more. And here's what I kind of said to her. As economists, you can't really factor in the big risk factors like Trump doing something dumb or crazy until it actually happens. But it does mean that the forecasts that you see and are presented by economists, they have a wider margin of error. It might not change the forecast itself, the risk that some things might happen or that uncertainty, but it does make the forecast itself more uncertain. And look, if you want more property market update type videos like this, do me a quick favor and hit the like button. That's how I know whether to do more of these types of videos or not. Subscribing, that always helps too. We're well on our way to growing this community to 50,000 subscribers. And that's why we need to look at the 4 reasons that these forecasts could be too optimistic. And first is that New Zealand's economy is really bad. Unemployment is sitting at 5.1%. Most economists think it's going to go up to kind of 5.2, 5.3%. And what that really means is that people are losing their jobs. You know, I read the news in bed most mornings and I scroll through my phone, and I was looking on Stuff the other day and I just saw that in a single week, 4 cafe owners in Wellington were all closing down or calling it quits. And when you read these sorts of stories of business owners who have lost their livelihood, workers who have lost their jobs, you're left with that deep sense of things aren't going well in New Zealand at the moment. I mean, how are you going to go out and bid up the price of a house if you've just lost your income and just lost your job? And it's not just that people who lose their jobs decide that they're going to get out of the market. One of my financial advisors, Derry, he was just working with an investor, and the investor was planning to go and buy an investment property for their financial future. They got it under contract, and at the last minute, this investor had to pull out. And the reason was that his boss is restructuring the business. Now, he hasn't lost his job, and he might even not lose his job. But you can't go out and make a big decision, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on an investment property if you might lose your income, because how's he going to afford it if that happens? And so it's not just about unemployment slowing down the housing market, it's also that fear that you could be unemployed even if it doesn't happen. The second thing is our economy is shrinking. It went down about 1% in the most recent September quarter, so overall our standard of living is going down. Now the trouble with that kind of 1% reduction in our living standards is that isn't shared evenly. Some of you watching this, your incomes are probably still going strong. Some others of you are going to be doing it really, really tough. So a lot of people say, hey look, all we had to do was survive till 2025. But you might have to start saying to yourself, God, I hope things are fixed by 2026. And number 3 is net migration. You know, back in 2023, net migration added over 130,000 people to our population. Way more people were coming to New Zealand than leaving. That number has dropped to 30,000 a year. And while we still have more people coming in than are leaving, more Kiwis are moving overseas than ever. And you know, I took one of my really good friends out for lunch the other day, and we're sitting at this restaurant in Auckland. She's sipping away at her tea, and she says to me, Ed, I've got to tell you, I'm moving to Australia. I just don't feel like I can get ahead over here in New Zealand. And she's got 3 young kids, so I get it. She's going to earn more money in Australia. And right now you might be thinking, holy heck, Ed, I knew you said you were going to tell us all the bad stuff, but this sounds like things are pretty bad in New Zealand at the moment. Well, wait, there's more. The 4th thing you've got to know about the New Zealand housing market is there are a lot of listings on the market. In fact, they are the highest that they've been in the last 9 to 10 years. So there are a lot of properties sitting on the market on TradeMe, OneRoof, realestate.co.nz, those kinds of websites with property owners trying to sell. And that means that buyers can be pretty choosy. They can play sellers off against each other to try and get a decent price. So if there's a lot of people trying to sell compared to the number of buyers, how are house prices going to go up? So those are the 4 main reasons that those bank forecasts might be too aggressive, but just keep in mind that there are 2 sides to the story that we've got to dig into. On the upside, interest rates have fallen off a cliff. Just 1 year ago, you could fix your mortgage at 7.4% for a year. Now, it's gone down over 2%. Some banks are actually going as low as 5.15% for a year. Interest rates haven't fallen this far or this fast since the GFC back in 2008. And if you've got an $800,000 mortgage, your monthly repayment could go down by over $1,100 per month, or roughly $270 a week. That means that mortgages are more affordable. So you can keep your repayment the same, but borrow more money when you're trying to go buy a house. So when people are out there looking at houses, they're able to borrow more money to pay more for that house. And that means that people are more likely to outbid each other. You know, the second reason is that banks are also loosening the purse strings and lending out more money. The harsh truth is that our housing market in New Zealand, it's influenced by what our banking overlords decide to do. ANZ, BNZ, ASB, Westpac, they control about 85% of the mortgage market. So if they decide to make it easier for you to borrow more money, then we can all go out and be more competitive, bidding up house prices. A year ago, if you applied for a $500,000 mortgage, they'd see if you could afford it, not at the 7% interest rate they were charging, but at a 9% interest rate. That's called the servicing test rate. Well, since then, over the last 12 months, they've dropped that servicing test rate from roughly 9%. Now they're seeing if you can afford that mortgage at 7 to 7.5%. Now, what that means for you is, let's say you're a first home buyer and you could afford a $500,000 mortgage at the start of 2024. Well, today, you might be able to borrow $587,000, so an extra 87 grand only a year later. So not only is the mortgage cheaper, but banks are willing to let you borrow even more money. So when you decide to look at a house and think, okay, we really like it, could we afford to pay a little bit more? Well, it makes that market that much more competitive. The more competition from buyers, the higher the house prices tend to go. And the third reason the housing market could get a boost in 2025 is actually some of the law changes out of the government, because they have changed the lending laws. So do you remember a few years back, there were these rules that if you spent too much money on coffee, Netflix, or Uber Eats, the bank wouldn't let you get a mortgage. Well, that was called the CCCFA. And before he quit as the Commerce Minister, Andrew Bailey changed those rules and rolled those rules back to what it was a few years ago. Now remember, the CCCFA changes were the straw that broke the camel's back in 2021. The same month that those rules came in, property prices started plummeting. Now it's gone. people are able to spend more on a house again. And so that means that the market becomes a little bit more competitive. House prices could get that boost. And the fourth, and probably the most important point, is that property prices are cyclical. 18% of the time they go down, and roughly 82% of the time they go up in any given year. You know, in the average year, property prices have gone up roughly about 6% per year. And it's very tempting to say, well, house prices went down 1.5% over the last year. This is the new normal. I'm never going to get a return on my house. But just because house prices were a bit tough over the last 12 months and they went down by 1.5%, that doesn't mean that they'll go down again over the next 12 months. So if we look at year by year, there are times where house prices might go up by 20% one year and they go down 14% the next year. Or they go up 2% one year and they go down 1.5% the next year. Property price inflation jumps around from year to year, and it's not necessarily that what happened in one year predicts what's going to happen in the following 12 months. So I wouldn't buy into the idea that house prices didn't go up much last year, so they won't change much this year. So those are the 4 reasons why property prices might not go up much in 2025. And the 4 reasons why those banks could be right. But now it's over to you to decide what you think will happen. Let me know down in the comments how much you think house prices could change in 2025. Will they go up, down, or stay the same?